looking to build, one of the first questions you're going to ask is, how much does it cost to build a home? And home building is so worth it. I mean, you're building a house based off of your vision, your design, and the location you want to live. It's so worth it, but it is expensive. So let's dive into some of the costs that you should expect in Central Arkansas if you're planning on building a home. So you're going to need to account for land. Land, I've seen land as probably as cheap as 25,000. I usually don't see anything less than that, but there's a lot of land being sold right now, especially near Little Rock, between 50 and 120,000. So there's definitely an expense when it comes to land. There's if you decide to go bank, which this is all based off of working with a bank, but you got your closing costs, your title costs. Um, uh, Builders will ask for a down payment. Now there is an upside to the down payment in that it almost always will reduce your cash to close. Banks will just take that into account. So it's not like you have to do your cash to close plus a down payment. They kind of sandwich it together, and I'll show you exactly what I mean on this next slide. But there's a builder down payment, and then banks don't want to cover 100% of the bill. They want the family to have some skin in the game. So a lot of banks are doing 90% where they'll cover 90% of the value, but they expect the family to have 10%. And there are some banks that will they want you to have up to 20% in the bill. So just keep that in mind, that there's an expectation for cash to close. Um, and then there's insurance, and there's so these last two are like during the build. So there's insurance, and then there's also interest payments on what has been used for the build. And I'll give some examples of that. So I have up here on the screen, this is an actual closing. This was the end of 2023, and the house was going to cost 400,000 to build. The land cost, it was actually 25,000, but they had closing costs and title fees and some taxes. And so it costed them not 25 but 27. So we have that reflected here. So what the bank did is they said, okay, to the actual cost of the build plus the house is 426,000. And that's what they used to determine the 10% skin. They did 90%, they covered up to 90%. That's how they determined their 10%. So they told the family, hey, we're willing to cover 384,000. That's what we're willing to cover. So automatically you go, uh-oh, the build is 400,000. They're willing to cover 384. Who's going to cover the difference? Well, the family. And on top of the difference, so not only do they want them to cover, I think it was like 14,000, they also want them to cover the bank fees, the title fees, all of that. So there was $6,000 in bank fees, closing fees, paperwork fees, and you can see that here on the right: application, origination, processing fees, underwriting fees. That was all part of the 6,000 here. And then the title company also had their fees as well for closing, and that summed up to 1,500. Well, the builder requested a down payment, very normal, very expected. And again, when I was on the previous slide, I talked about how you wouldn't have to like pay it twice, if that makes sense. So the original cash to close was actually 19,000. But because this family provided a receipt of that down payment to the bank, they just deducted it. So their cash to close was 14. And truly, they did pay 19. They just paid 5 to the builder and then 14 to the bank, if that makes sense. So they just prepaid 5. So 384 was their loan, and then they had the bank fee, the title fee, the down payment, and then the additional cash to close. So they brought to the closing table 14,000, but really they paid 19, if that makes sense. 14 plus 5. So if you include the land that they paid cash, your cash to close, the down payment for the builder, they had to have 46,000 to start the build. Now let's talk about after after you start building. So uh, as a default, Silverfield Construction, we will actually include the builder's risk in our 400,000. But some banks actually want the families to hold the builder's risk. So I just have it here as an example. You may not always need to cover the builder's risk, but if the bank does want you to hold the policy, that's a up to 3,500 a year, and it could be more depending on how big your home is and where you're located, how, for your builder's risk. But we usually we always account for the builder's risk unless we're told that the family's not going to. And then every time the bank goes and inspects, and they will inspect when the builder requests the next draw, so the next sum of money to continue building, the bank will charge the family an inspection fee. And we've seen a lot of them. Sometimes they're $50, but sometimes they're $250. So ask the bank what they charge, but they're going to send someone from the bank to take a look at the house to see that progress has been completed. And then they charge the family for that visit, and then they provide the builder with that fees. Some banks will actually charge an appraisal fee per inspection too. So just ask them what they're going to charge, but know that they're probably going to charge something every time there's a draw. So we as builders like to do the least amount of draws possible. That way you're not paying all these fees. And it speeds up our build time by not having to request funds from the bank as often. So that's our goal. But usually the banks will dictate how many draws they're going to do. And then there's interest payments during the build. So it starts out really low because the first draw it's usually between 30 and 80,000 that's provided to the builder to start the foundation, start the clearing. And so you just pay interest on what's been provided to the builder. So the first draw, the first month, it's going to be really low. And then every month, it will start to increase until kind of the full amount of the loan, the full, what you would pay interest for 384 towards the very end. So make sure you account for that, because if you're in a home right now and you're building, you're going to be paying not only your current home, but also interest payments on that. And we as builders try very hard to build quickly, but also keep the high quality. That way those interest payments are as low as possible. That's our goal. So again, here on the right is the actual breakdown. This was from that closing back in the end of 2023, just so you can see all those fees. But you would think, okay, 384, no problem, but know that family had to have 46,000 in funds available in order to start the build. So I'm Holly with Silverfield Construction. We've been in the remodel and new construction for over 10 years. We're in Central Arkansas, licensed and insured home builders. Homes starting at 300,000. Please give us a call. Check us out online at lrsilverfieldconstruction.com. We'd love to talk to you about building you a custom home. Thanks so much.